event by remembering Allah. And we begin with the word of Allah. And with us today, we have Ismail Saidi. Ismail Saidi grew up in Naperville, Illinois. He is currently pursuing a career in medicine as he studied health sciences and chemistry at Benedictine University. He's a published research student from Benedictine, and he serves as the assistant imam of ICN and teaches Quran. He had completed his hifz under the tutelage of Sheikh Ismail Al-Qadi in Jordan. So without any further ado, Ismail Saidi.
Assalamu alaikum. May peace and blessings be upon you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. By the morning brightness, and by the night when it grows still, your Lord has not forsaken you, nor does he dislike you, and the future will be better for you than the past. Your Lord is sure to give you so much that you will be well pleased. Did he not find you an orphan and shelter you? Did he not find you lost and guide you, find you in need and satisfy your need? So do not be harsh with the orphan, and do not chide the one who asks for help. Talk about the blessings of your Lord. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair, Ismail. Thank you for reciting and for translating for us. Up next, inshallah, we're going to be turning things to Brother Kashif Fakhruddin, the president of ICN, to share with us a few words.
Thank you, everyone. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. I'm honored to be here to open this program. Honestly, this is one of those programs very important for our community. And I thank the organizers, our school district, the few committees that I would name, our school district committee from ICN, the youth committee, and the 360 services committee that have collaborated together to offer this program. And would like to acknowledge the efforts of some of the guest speakers that are here, Ryan, Jill, Sheikh Umar, Nasser Halim. Appreciate your time to prepare for this event. You know, this is something that I think when in the introduction it was talked about, is one of those topics that is really not discussed or not a lot of programs getting offered. So ICN, we want to make sure that we will have a structured program offering that will be there for anyone that who has been going through or experiencing these challenges. They will be able to share the questions on these forums and will be able to benefit. So I really thank Brother Rahman also to really lead and organize this. And I know from the youth committee, they've been working to put together this program So that's why I want to highlight some of these committees from ICN to offer this for our community. And I'm hoping that more of the attendance wise, we will see the increase and our community will benefit from these programs. And from a religion perspective as well, it is very important that we have this balanced approach. Sometimes that we tend to have everything to be, you will see some of the guidance from the experts. The reason I mentioned that in our culture, or that it said then you need to be just religious, they tend to forget the mental health part. So that's why programs like these will help us to go do a deep dive. With that, I really thank everyone who has put together their time to organize this program. With that, please go ahead and start the program.
Right, Jazakallah khair, Brother Kashif. Next up, we have Sheikh Omar Hadrouj. Sheikh Omar is our Sheikh at ICN, and he's an assistant imam and an educational director. And he actually also offers spiritual counseling at ICN. So Sheikh Omar, whenever you're ready.
Assalamu alaikum. Hope everyone is doing well tonight. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being here with us on this Friday night. Thank you to Brother Rahman and Zakia and Aman from the side of the Masjid, the Youth Committee, the School District Engagement Committee. And thank you to Ryan and Jill from the 360 Youth Services side for us to be able to come together and have this important discussion. We've always said that this is something that we're still, we're behind in terms of addressing, but we're trying to kind of make up maybe for some of the missed time, some of our own shortcomings in addressing these types of important issues. And you're going to hear, inshallah, from the experts and from people who are a lot more, I think, capable of addressing it from the side of, mental health and experience and these things. But I just wanted very, very briefly to highlight the fact that from our religious perspective, from the tradition of Islam, that there's not a contradiction or a clash between religious practice or between being a practicing individual of Islam and seeking mental health help, improving one's mental health from a professional perspective. There's been this misconception or misunderstanding that I think has been addressed at least recently and has, been kind of deconstructed, but still I think needs to be emphasized, which is that this idea that an issue in one's mental health or struggling with one's mental health or even having mental illness is synonymous with a lack of religiosity or a weakness in faith. And I don't have enough time to deconstruct this idea completely, but it's enough, I think, for us to look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, as well as in the life of our own Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, shows us in a very practical way that this is not something that is a fact, that if you have mental health issues or if you're struggling with this type of emotional pain and so on and so forth, that means that you are a weak believer or that your faith is somehow deficient. If you just look in the life of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you find that he experienced a tremendous amount of emotional pain. In fact, one of the entire years of his life, when they look back at it from a historical perspective in his life, they call it the year of sadness because of what he experienced in terms of loss around him and how that had an impact on him. And of course, his connection to Allah, his connection to God helped him through that and helped him to be, to cope and to get through those times of difficulty. But it shows us that it's not, that oh, this person is religious, this person is a prophet of God, and so this means that they're not going to experience struggle or pain or emotional trauma and difficulty. And that's not just with our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you look in the Quran and you find very beautiful and interesting examples of Yaqub, the father of Yusuf, Jacob, the father of Joseph, who goes blind. Allah talks about him going blind from the sadness that he experienced from the loss of his son, from being separated from his son for many years. He actually physically goes blind. You see Moses, alayhi salam, peace be upon him and upon all the prophets, that Allah describes multiple times throughout his story, and he's associated, or you have the emotion of fear, right? That comes up multiple times as well. That he's fearful based off of what's happening around him. And it's very interesting because Musa alayhi salam, is always seen through our tradition as someone of immense strength and of just a great resolve. But that doesn't stop the fact that he experienced fear, what we may call even anxiety and difficulty of what he went through. But he was able to overcome, he was able to get through it. And just those few examples should show us these are the best of creation. These are the chosen servants of God. These are the prophets who we always look up to as our role models and our examples. And they themselves experience this emotional pain or these difficulties or these hardships. So it should tell us that if we're experiencing something that's not an indication that we're weak in faith, but it's a call for us to seek that help. Yes, definitely seek comfort in God and seek that insulation that comes with our relationship with Him, but also to take advantage of the resources that we have to seek help for ourselves. Our Prophet ﷺ tells us in one of his traditions, in one of the hadith, he says, God did not send a disease except that He sent a cure. Which means, as some of the scholars explained it, there's not a problem except that there's a solution. And this in and of itself and intrinsically gives us a motivation and a push and an allowance to go and seek that help, to seek that solution to the problems that we're facing. And a lot of times that does come in the form of seeking mental help, seeking professional counseling, so on and so forth. And even if we ourselves are not experiencing that, we are, alhamdulillah, at a point where we're not struggling or dealing with mental illness currently or mental health struggles, but it becomes a responsibility on us to help others to seek help. And this is a foundational principle in our tradition, that you may not be experiencing something, but to learn about it, to know about it, so that you can also help others seek help, facilitate for others to get help, is not something that's good or not something that's an option. It's a religious requirement on us. And this is the goal of programs like this, is that for us to seek help for ourselves, number one, and to kind of break through those barriers and those taboos to be able to seek that help and seek that mental wellness and betterment. And then also, as importantly, to seek to help others to seek help. And that is, in a nutshell, the goal of not just this program, not just this idea here that we're gathering together for, but a foundational and a fundamental principle of our tradition, of our faith, to be a people who help others, whatever that help looks like, and to facilitate hope for others as well. And even if we've fallen short, and I'm the first to admit I've fallen short in doing this within our community and beyond, but it's something that we are hopefully, inshallah, improving upon and working towards, and this event is a beautiful example of that. I have 1 minute left, and I'm going to yield the rest of my time, my 1 minute, to Nasser. I want to hear, inshallah, what he has to say, but that's just what I have, and so I hope that in that very, very brief discussion that we can start to remove these taboos, remove these barriers, Thank you all again. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Omar. That was very beneficial and also shows us that Islamically we are encouraged to take care of our mental health. So next up we have Nasser Halim. So a little bit about Nasser. He graduated from Northwestern University in 2020 with a degree in economics. He currently is working as a tech consultant in Chicago. Nasser is the youngest brother of 4. He has 2 elder brothers, Azam and Miraj. His parents, as well as himself, have strived to shed light on the mental health struggles that led to the death of their beloved Arman. It is an effort that they know will be vital to countless other families going forward.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and thank you for being here. I do want to highlight the significance of today. Today's actually Arman's birthday. He would have been 26 today. And it's a very difficult day for sure. But I in his memory, like, I'm definitely very driven and to talk today. So I'll say to all the youth, I was definitely in your shoes, growing up in this community and having the pressures that we have on us, specifically within this community, and that's a very high standard of success. And Arman did too, all my brothers did. And so first, what I just want to touch on is I do want to touch on the type of person that Arman was. And to be clear, he was my best friend. Like, he was my companion. He was my rock, all these things. And he was a tremendously nice and giving and caring person who was very successful and was able to talk so many other people through their struggles, through their problems. But when it was time for him to help himself, that's where he struggled. That's where, he didn't know, and he was scared of getting help. And that's really the important thing. It's to know when you need to get help. He started going through his struggles about 5 years ago. Basically, after he took the MCAT is when it really came to light of what was going on with him. And through the process of going through medical school and taking test after test, I'm sure all those stressful situations just piled on top of the mental illness that was already like residing underneath that. And it added up, and he did not want to get help. He did not want to get help. And by the time when mental health help was needed, it was too late. He had made up his mind, and that was it. And that's where I want to start here. If you are going through a mental health struggle, mental health illness, this isn't something that you can push through. It's not something that you can just push off to the side until you're done with that test, until you're done with those applications or whatever. It's something that you need to get help for right now. You need to seek it out right now. It's the most urgent thing that you can do, and it's the best way to help yourself. And I know that I'm speaking to the youth right now, so maybe there isn't as much education out there about what a mental illness or what mental health condition can feel like, but like it's something that can make you feel irritable. It can make you feel suspicious. You don't feel yourself. You feel more tired than usual. You feel less joy out of the things that make you happy. You don't see the point in doing well in anything. And I want everyone to understand this is a real thing. It's not something that's imagined or in your head or any less real than having, a real sickness or breaking your arm or something along those lines. It's real. And just like a sickness or breaking a bone, you need to go to a doctor. You need to go to a mental health professional. And it's vital because they can give you the help that you need. And along with that, it should also be noted that what's really important is that you open up, that when you feel that you are struggling, opening up to the people around you about what you're going through is so important, because the people around you need to know how they can help you, and they can help you. A teacher, a parent, a friend, a sibling, anybody. Don't feel the need to keep this thing inside of you because you feel ashamed or whatever. Like, this is something that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be treated as such. And along with that, if anybody, and I'm talking to the youth specifically, do not let someone tell you that the things that are going on your head, that they aren't real, or you're just imagining them. That they are real. And I don't know how to change someone else's mind, but it needs to be said. um and to the families of people that are going through mental health struggles, like, please understand that the best way to help someone who's going through something is to listen in a very non-judgmental way. um don't try to convince somebody that their life is good, or they have all these things going for them or anything, because or that or blame or and please don't, like, blame them for the struggle that they're going through. Please understand that you know people that are going through mental health challenges, they are in an extremely painful place, a very difficult and and again, painful place, that it's the last thing that they need to hear is, you should be this way, you should feel these things. Please just listen to them, have empathy, and meet them where they are. That's the best way to help someone who has a mental illness or is going through a mental health struggle. um and even now, like, my family, we tell our story to other families, and we can sense their hesitance in talking to a professional, or um or to make a big deal about what their family member who's going through a mental health struggle is going through. Like, it's it even now, like, and it's hard because we know the struggle that Armand went through, and we just want everyone not to feel ashamed or trapped or feel like they can't get help. So again, I just want to lay that out there. Like, we just need to have the environment where we can seek out help, and not feel judged for doing so. Um, and I think I'll stop there. I want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank everyone for putting this together. This is such a great thing, and such a great thing for this community.
Thank you so much, Nasser, for sharing your story with us. And again, our thoughts and prayers are always with your family and your brother. And I know these things are not easy to talk about, but I know that you have shown me and shown all of us the importance of talking about it. And so I want to make sure that we properly thank you for that. Um, Up next, we do have some licensed counselors with us that we're honored to have, Ryan and Jill. And so they are with 360 Youth. So Ryan is a licensed professional counselor and a board certified art therapist at 360 Youth Services. He earned his Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology, Art Therapy degree from Adler University after completing his Bachelor's of Arts Psychology and Studio Art from Knox College. Ryan specializes in working with youth/adolescents, utilizing evidence-based or trauma-informed art therapy and counseling approaches to help individuals master interpersonal skills and develop positive changes across all settings. His clinical approaches address concerns including, but not limited to, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, self-esteem, stress, and school-related issues. And along with Ryan, we've got Jill, who is a licensed clinical social worker at 360 Youth Services. She earned her master's in social work from the Jane Addams College of Social Work of the University of Illinois in Chicago. Jill works in both office and school-based settings and works with youth/adolescents in a trauma-informed lens with concerns such as at-risk behaviors, legal system involvement, depression, anxiety, identity formation, and self-esteem. Jill embraces treatment with others utilizing a strengths-based perspective, and brings knowledge of the impact of intersecting identities and societal norms on mental health treatment. Without any further ado, we turn it to the 360 Youth team, Jill and Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us this evening. With the time we have left, we'll just jump into our presentation. But I think everyone that spoke before us said pretty much what we're going to say, but in a very, in a way that we would agree. And we're just going to go further into that and offer you all just more of a professional perspective. So Ryan, I don't.
Yeah, and then in addition to that too, one of our additional hopes is to go ahead and provide you with tools and resources to support those in your community and those that you love when an individual is experiencing difficulties with mental health and with thoughts of suicide as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me go ahead and pull it up. All right, can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, you can go ahead to the next slide, Ryan. Okay, so just really wanted to start off with just letting you all know that mental illness is not something that everyone will experience, but there's something that we should all strive for, which is mental wellness. Not everything is going to be a diagnosable disorder from the DSM, but we all have brains and we all have emotions. And, it's good to not only just see how we can help people who might be experiencing a mental illness, but also how do we ourselves take care of ourselves so we don't develop a mental illness. It's just like health. There are interventions for when your health goes wrong, but in general, how do we stay healthy? So that's what we're gonna kind of go into. Okay, so we're just gonna start with talking about stigma. Stigma, unfortunately, is a very strong barrier to getting mental health care. How we kind of defined stigma is just social and cultural viewpoints against an individual and their experience with mental illness and or their struggles with maintaining good mental wellness. Unfortunately, the impacts of stigma can involve people feeling invalidated about their emotions. It can involve feeling isolated, judged, even being discriminated. They're not only just stigma is in our smaller day-to-day interactions with people, sometimes there are discrimination from our workplace, our schools, and even ourselves. Like we can put a stigma on ourselves when it comes to taking care of our mental health. And it's important that we recognize the stigma for what it is and then work to actively go against that. So we're just gonna start with just sharing some statistics with you all to kind of see just how prevalent this is. I think most of these statistics are based in the United States, but definitely it's not just the United States problem. So about 17% of American youth experience a mental disorder. So that means diagnosable. 15 to 25% of American Muslims report anxiety disorders. 9 to 30% of American Muslims also report mood disorders. So they're just for clarification, in the DSM, which is our diagnostic manual, there are many different types of disorders. But when we talk about mood disorders, we're just discussing things like depression, anxiety, things like that that primarily affect mood, not so much the more intensive ones. Every 12 minutes, a person dies by suicide. Suicide is the #1 cause of death amongst adolescent girls globally. And suicide is the #2 cause of death amongst US 10 to 24-year-olds. So pretty much like, since hopefully we have a lot of youth here today, this is a problem that is affecting your population the most. And I think it's very hard to talk about your emotions as a teenager. I know it was for me personally. And unfortunately, if we don't get the help we need at a young age, we carry these unhealthy patterns with us into adulthood and we repeat them generationally. So it's a good thing to kind of address them early while we have a chance. Okay, so we're just gonna also talk about some warning signs. Some of these were stated earlier, but so we're just gonna repeat a few and hopefully add a few more. So if people, I think these are more about warning signs for suicide. And I can also bring up some signs about just general mental health, but especially when it comes to suicide, if people are talking about ending their life. And that might not mean necessarily, I want to kill myself. It might come off as, I don't want to wake up today. I just don't want to get out of bed. I've heard people say like, oh, COVID can take me. Those are all little signs of maybe people are thinking about, if not having a plan for suicide, it's their suicide ideation. There tends to be struggle with taking care of yourselves. It's like such things, basic needs like showering, eating, doing your hair. And that's not to say that you have to be prim and proper, but it's just to say our general needs not being met. Sleep is either too much sleep or too little sleep can be a sign as well. Expressing negative thoughts or feelings, especially if someone seems very pessimistic, or just not being able to see the full picture of something is a warning sign. Loss of interest in activities that you usually would want to do. Isolating from people like family, friends, and community. Sometimes I hear, especially this one is a little tied into energy. Like people are just saying, I'm tired and I don't want to be around others. And they might not physically be tired, but dealing with mental health struggles presents emotional, mental exhaustion. And having to communicate with others or be around other people can be very exhausting. Dangerous or risky behavior. Like sometimes I know, at least I work with a lot of youth on probation and just demonstrating other behavioral concerns. And where I talk to them and there's like, I'm not depressed, I'm not suicidal. And I'll ask them, well, when you did so-and-so action that was, I guess, considered delinquent behavior, I would ask like, well, what was the motive for that? And they'll say, I just don't care. And so it's not always the picture of just sadness and being alone. Sometimes it's doing behaviors that are not socially acceptable. And sometimes putting affairs in order. So what that might mean is if someone is giving things away, if someone's kind of like asking things like, you know, what would it be like without me? Or writing letters, like preparatory acts are just signs. And this is a non-exhaustive list. There are definitely other signs, but I think it's also important to note that unfortunately, some people do not demonstrate signs. Some people are very good at hiding their struggles. And that's the important thing about combating the stigma, because, you know, if you present as everything is okay and I have my life together, and then you hear that people are not so accepting, or it's not acceptable to, I guess, let that vulnerable part of you present itself. Sometimes people are shocked when someone completes suicide and they didn't have the warning signs. And these are just other considerations to think about when it comes to developing a mental health concern or mental illness. But also before I go into that, just to say that there is a difference between a clinically diagnosed condition and just general emotions. So for example, someone can experience anxiety from a legitimate concern. I would not say they have a mental health disorder. But if there's a consistent behavior, and especially when it starts to disrupt functioning, that's when we will look at it being a disorder. But something like stress is very tricky and sneaky, because someone can be, they'll say, I have finals, or I have homework, I have college apps, and I'm just stressed. And then I'll also see that they stopped eating, they stopped hanging out with people, they become increasingly negative. And I said, you have to learn how to manage your stress before it becomes something else. But other considerations that can lead to mental health concerns include, dealing with your identity, your sense of self-worth. Like I know especially for youth and in high school, maybe even earlier, we always talk about what do you want to be in the future, or what's your purpose? And sometimes when you don't know, or that isn't knowledge that you have ready, like at 17, if you don't know what you want to do for the rest of your life, sometimes I've seen clients get very upset, and it can lead into something like depression or an anxiety disorder. Especially at 360, we do serve the LGBTQ population, and research shows us that if there is non-family acceptance of people with that identity, it can lead to very intense mental health concerns. And that's not to say that people have to agree with people's life decisions in that area, but general acceptance and continuing of loving someone, if that is lacking, it leads to mental health concerns. And then just also the point of balance between Islam and secularism. And what I mean by that is we live in a country that Islam is not, I will say we are not inclusive or welcoming to that. And I think it's hard for youth to have that belief system and then go to school and then having to balance, how do I identify myself as this in a world that doesn't? And sometimes it's very difficult, and people experience bullying, going on to even deeper of Islamophobia and religious cultural insensitivity. These are more societal things that contribute to, unfortunately, mental health concerns. And then also unsupportive parenting. We work with youth primarily, and what we see is when parents aren't supportive of their child's emotions, their desires to a sense of just being generally supportive, it can create insecurity and it can hurt them. So we just wanted to share a quick video about how suicide can affect other people or other family members, unfortunately, when people complete this. This is not to say that we want to make people feel bad if you are experiencing suicide ideation, but just to say that there's another perspective out there than what you can reason with.
He gave me the greatest gift of my life. We started going out in high school, like high school sweethearts.
Our son David, he was our firstborn. We often say that when his pain had stopped, our pain had just started.
I used to be very angry with David. But that obviously doesn't last very long.
Said that he couldn't explain his feelings and that no one could understand his pain. And he'd just get angry. And then I'd get angry. And I just lost it. And I beat myself up a long time afterwards. The what ifs we hadn't fought. But it was the depression. Not me, not the fights, it was the pain. And he'd hidden it so well. And I just want him back. And we all want him back.
Then we lost Mum. And she just couldn't cope. It killed her. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. All right, so I'll go ahead and take it over from here. So I think when it comes to the next step for this part of the presentation with suicide intervention, one of the most critical questions to go ahead and ask when viewing this kind of stuff or talking about the concept of suicide as well is about help. How do you help a family member, a community member, a loved one, or anyone who might be exhibiting signs of suicide, or anyone who might be suicidal at that too? And one of the first and the most important steps in this process is just simply awareness of the struggles, awareness of that suicide and thoughts of suicide exist in the first place, and the emotional responses of someone are present and valid at that as well. And it's often not, very obvious, since, many people experiencing thoughts of suicide often experience these thoughts in silence, and they often give no indication that, they may harm themselves as well. And with suicidal ideation or thoughts of suicide, it's a very isolating condition and an isolating experience for an individual as well. And as you guys have, and as everyone has saw in that video too, the family saw no indication as to what was going on as well. It just, came up. Um, and and when it comes to awareness too, like as a person of the community, as a family member, as a friend, or just as a human being as well, you can make a difference by simply having awareness for that of what an individual might be potentially experiencing as well, and this affirmation and understanding that thoughts of suicide and overall mental health are prevalent, and we experience them for a particular reason as well. So the question to go ahead and ask is, once you find out if someone tells you that they have thoughts of suicide, it's asking yourself the question of what then? And the first step in that is to stay calm, listen empathetically, and to get help as well. Now, oftentimes, if this is something that's coming out of the blue, and if anyone is talking about suicide in the first place, it could be kind of an overwhelming experience, not only for them, but also for you as the listener as well. And the reason for that is that this is a heavy topic. It's an important and vital one, but it can be an overwhelming one at that too. And so oftentimes, we might go ahead and feel numb, we might react, or we might not know what to say in the moment as well, given the intensity of the topic of conversation. But in that as well, what we need to acknowledge is the fact too that because it's intense, it's important as well. Um, and so again, that's where this first step really comes into play. It's just listen empathetically, and as what was said before, provide a neutral environment so someone could just express their emotions as well. Because when invalidation occurs, when someone tells you like, "Well, you look happy, like why are you experiencing this in the first place?" or "You shouldn't be feeling this way," that would oftentimes cause someone to go ahead and implode and to internalize their feelings again. Either they might agree with you, or they might go ahead and stop talking about it altogether. But simply just being present and listening and asking, just being there for someone, can really make such a big difference for an individual who's going through with this in the first place. So again, the next thing is like hearing about a loved one or friend or family member struggles, may produce feelings of anger, worry, and sadness, and any emotion that's under the book too. And to tell others is such a large step. And we don't and what I mean by this too is the fact of expressing an emotion can be vulnerable, and oftentimes very much is. So for an individual to go ahead and share a thought of suicide, or even their emotions in the first place, they're showing trust. They're showing, trust in you, that they can go ahead and share a vulnerable part of you as well. And part of that experience is to go ahead and hear them out too. Another thing that we would also recommend is like don't deny another person's experiences, and everyone is entitled to their personal belief. I apologize. Um, they're entitled to their personal experience. What this means is, the fact that everyone's perceptions are their experiences and their reality too. So even if you were just go ahead and think like, well, they don't have it as bad as someone else, or well, they have everything else that's going great for them, people can still experience these significant emotions as well. And again, often one of the other recommendations is to avoid blaming their own mental health on personal deficits, like being selfish, being crazy, you know, being entitled, or a lack of religious commitment as well. Suicidal ideation and mental health impact everyone, no matter what part of walk of life you're a part of as well. Mental health is a part of who we are, and it's important to acknowledge and validate the existence of these emotions too. So things to look out for that increase the risk of suicide is the lack of self-worth, previous suicidal attempts, a history of mental illness or decrease in mental wellness, past trauma or abuse, chronic illness, low self-esteem, impulsivity, and lack of connections with others as well. That last part, the lack of connection with others. Like I said before, suicidal ideation is a very isolating event, and very isolating condition as well. And oftentimes, someone feels very alone in what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, and don't feel comfortable sharing with what's happening. But by connecting with someone, you can really make a big difference too. Um, when you go ahead and really understand like what are some of the risk factors involved, also think about like how can you go ahead and assess for what we call protective factors. And what I mean by that is what is important in a person's life. What do they find meaning in, or what do they find hope in the first place as well? So some of these involve effective problem solving skills, social connectedness from family, school, and other religious institutions. Motivation and hope for the future as well is also a big one. Impulse control, a positive sense of self-worth and contributions, and also responsibility and connection towards others. So families, friends, children, pets, and all that kind of stuff too. Um, let's see. So one of the things I know that we're kind of running out of time a little bit too, but one of the things I did want to go ahead and quickly show is another resource for everyone who is a part of this meeting too. So at 360 and a lot of with different mental health agencies, we do what's called a suicide risk assessment, which is fairly comprehensive and asks lots of questions too. On your end, as family members, as friends, and as community members as well, everyone has access to this resource as well. And it doesn't have to be intensive, but it's just a matter of asking the right questions in order to really get an understanding of how intense and what the risk level is for an individual's thought of suicide as well. So oftentimes the first question to ask is if anyone's had a thought of suicide, simply asking like, have you ever wished to be dead or wished that you can go to sleep and not wake up again? One of the things I do want to go ahead and clarify about this statement in particular is that this statement is different from having the active thought of what happens if I were to die, what happens after I die, for example, as well. And that's very different from a thought of suicide as well. And actually thinking about what happens after I'm gone can be a very natural and very very understanding way of where a person might be at as well. And that's oftentimes what we see, and again, the thought and just the idea of like what happens after I die, it doesn't mean that someone has a thought of suicide or suicidal ideation. But when it starts to turn from like what happens after I die to like I really wish that I didn't wake up again, or I wish that COVID would take me, to Jill's example as well. That's where we start to go into the territory of suicidal ideation in the first place. And then additionally too, have you ever actually had any thoughts about killing yourself? So we're going from the concept of like wishing that we weren't here anymore to active thoughts of like, I am thinking about killing myself in the first place. And then we're starting to progress more into a higher risk level as well. And again, luckily with this community card here, through what's called the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, it gives you a set of instructions in terms of if someone answers yes to any of these questions. So again, if anyone answers yes to these two questions here, we go ahead and go directly to the more intense questions. So again, the next ones are, have you thought about how you might do this? So that includes a method. Have you had any intention of acting on these thoughts or killing yourself, as opposed to you have the thoughts, but you definitely would not act on them? And then finally, have you started working out or worked out the details of how you kill yourself? Do you intend to carry out this plan? And then finally, the question always asked too is, have you done anything, started anything, or prepared to do anything to end your life as well? And again, I know the verbiage is kind of funky here, but if I can give any advice in terms of what to be mindful of, is if someone expresses a thought of suicide and there is a method, if there's an intent, and if there's a plan, then there's cause for concern in terms of how likely the risk of suicide or suicidal behavior might occur as well. Um, And no matter what the case is, even if a person that you care about, a loved one or an individual that you know or member of the community expresses the thought of suicide, and even if it's not, a higher risk, that should be an indication that there's something more going on with this person as well that may, require some additional mental health support as well. And, to also for you as the person hearing this, to hear them out and to empathize with them as well, to really emphasize this notion that they are not alone and that they are supported and connected with you and the community as well. No matter what the case is, too, um, if an individual expresses an intent or plan to go ahead and carry out a thought of suicide, you need to go ahead and seek and try to find mental health support or behavioral health referral in the first place. And oftentimes, and as scary as this is, to go ahead and get immediate help from either emergency room, to call the suicide prevention hotline, or to call 911 as well. And this is the other key point. Stay with this person until they're able to get the help they need if they express an intent or a plan to commit suicide as well, because at that point, an individual's life may be in danger, for example, as well. Um, and the other thing I want to go ahead and point out too is that, of course, you can always go ahead and carry this card with you. Um, the other thing too is if you have an iPhone or an Android, this assessment or this CSSRS as it's called is also an app on your iPhone as well or for your Android. And when either yourself as a person who's hearing about this or you yourself are experiencing thoughts of suicide, you can go ahead and take the scale on an app that will indicate what kind of recommendations to do depending on the thought of suicide that you have as well. And as you can see here, there's an option about sharing your location. So again, you can share your location with others or you can block that. It's always great to go ahead and share your location in case something does happen. But again, if you just want to get an understanding of how intense is this thought of suicide for someone in the first place, this could be a great way to get that assessment to make sure that this individual or you yourself are getting the support that you need as well. Um, Yeah, so let's see here. So again, yes, make sure the person, you're with them. If they have an intent and plan, taking them for an assessment in the hospital. If no, still connect the person with a mental health care professional as well. Even if it's just the wish to be that going to sleep and not waking up again, you still that's still an indication that there's more going on for the individual that they could use more mental health support on as well. And again, if you're unsure, always contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And again, it's not only in this card and in this app, but it's also in this presentation as well. And you can just go ahead and type into Google like National Suicide Prevention Hotline and just ask away, and they'll go ahead and point you in the right direction. Finally, act. Tell someone, tell an adult if you're a friend, listen, empathize, respect, use hopeful language. Really kind of emphasize what kind of things are important for them to live as well. How do they feel connected, and what kind of meaning can they find in things within their own lives that give them hope for the future as well. And then additionally too, it's getting them connected with a mental health professional, and whoever this individual goes ahead and sees, like just keep them connected to get that support as well. Also follow up with them too, just to check in to see how they're doing. It doesn't have to be, uh, intense every single time, but just simply asking like how their day is, or just really kind of instilling this sense of hope and connectedness can make all the difference as well. Um, and again, one of the biggest things too is remind them of their impact on others in their lives and the impact that they have on the world as well. Again, this really kind of emphasizes the significance and the point of um, of how do they go ahead and how do they what kind of meaning can they find in their own lives, and how do they connect with others as well. I apologize, I'm kind of rushing through a little bit. And then additionally, at the end of this presentation, we do have a list of resources as well that you can always refer to if you're seeking additional information. And again, all these resources are great. One of the things I would also encourage is the Family and Youth Institute as well, because they have a fairly comprehensive guide for suicide education and also suicide support and support for individuals experiencing suicide as well. And that's all I have.
Right. Thank you so much, Ryan and Jill. That was such a good presentation. And I think it's really important to make ourselves informed on this topic because so many people are struggling with this in our community. So let's move on to the Q&A. So I have a few questions So this is for you, Ryan and Jill. My dad has a problem with therapists and psychiatrists because he thinks they will read our minds or know too much and say that I should just speak to him about my problems. I'm more comfortable with talking to a stranger about my mental health issues rather than him. How can I convince him, someone who believes in mental health but doesn't believe in the process of helping mental health matters, that I can trust and go to a therapist?
Yeah, I can go and start with that. I totally understand. I've had so many clients come and say, "Can you read my mind?" And I always say, "I'd be a millionaire if I could." Like, I like it's not. I cannot read minds. None of us can. But what we do is we just pay attention to patterns, and it's kind of like we can see the details a little more clear than if we had an emotional attachment to someone, like if they were a friend or family. So I guess I would say that if you are seeking help, one thing I think that could help is, getting whoever you are, if you find a therapist or someone that you're interested in, you can interview your therapist. You can ask them questions. You can pick us. Not all of us are the same, and we all have different approaches, and we all interact differently. And if it would help to bring that to us and say, "I have these concerns. I'm worried about this and that." We as a profession should be empathetic, we should be listening, and we should be aware of people's culture, and we should be respectful of that. So I think asking us the questions and putting them on the table, and we'll answer them for you. But also I would think that if you have a hard time connecting to a therapist, some of those hotlines would be a good source to go to for just immediate help.
Absolutely. And, I really kind of agree with Jill. I really do agree with Jill's point as well. It'd be great if we can go ahead and read minds, but, part of our, roles here and part of our training is, like Jill said, to go and recognize the patterns too, but to also go to also dive deeper from just seeing the behavior that we just kind of see across from the person next to us and what we call the ING behavior, and really understand like what's at the root of it, like what kind of function is it serving for the person as well. So if we see someone who's refusing to go to school or someone who is acting out as well, it's and again I have to acknowledge too, we're speaking in a neutral environment too, so it's very easy for me to say this, but in the moment too we react, and that's part of our nature as human beings. But it's also encouraging us to build skills to ask the question of like why is this happening in the first place too? What might be going on for a person that's contributing towards this? Is there increased sadness and anxiety and stress? There's always a reason for it in the first place too. And like Jill said, like reach out for mental health support if you're able to. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a great answer. Okay, next question for Jill and Ryan. How do we identify depression or mental health struggles within ourselves?
Yeah, so I think, if you're someone who has a history of mental health or mental illness, sometimes it's hard to identify your own patterns. But I think some of the things we said earlier, like, are you isolating? Are you not around people as much? General, like, irritability. Even the littlest things kind of set you off. Um, sadness, even though it's a kind of cliche emotion, but it's real. Feeling sad, feeling apathetic, like nothing matters. If your eating's off, if your sleeping's off, just noticing those things that maybe have usually been you. And if you might say, "Oh, I'm just stressed," and things like that, and it could be stress, but I think to note, even like your body will also tell you when something's wrong. For me, it's in my neck and my upper back. When that gets very tense, I know, okay, it's time. I need to do some more self-care and focus on myself.
Yeah. And it can, and to Joel's point too, it can, like, there are some commonalities and patterns when it comes to depression, but it can manifest itself differently, in everyone else too. I know Joel said beforehand, like, she feels it, like, in this area, and kind of whenever stress occurs, like, for me, it's just, I feel fatigued and I feel tired quite a bit as well. And that's a good indication for me as well. And, when it comes to, depression and other mental health, one of the caveats I want to add to this too is that, what we're talking about is more kind of acute mental health as opposed to chronic. Because, and if an individual is experiencing, let's say, for depression for a majority of their lives, like, that's their sense of normal. So I think a great indication in term is really kind of identifying how it's impacting your daily life and daily functioning. Like if you go out and like wake up for school and you're noticing that you're fatigued all the time, if you're noticing that you're irritable more than usual, and it becomes a struggle basically just to kind of attend. And now granted, school sometimes can be difficult, especially during the pandemic and staring at the computer for hours on end. But if you're noticing that it's if it's more impactful to the point where focus even isn't there in the first place, that can be an indication that there's something more going on as well. Whether or not you talk with a friend, a family member, or a mental health care professional, you can go ahead and find, unravel some answers in terms of how it's impacting you and why it's impacting you in the first place.
Thank you. So I have two questions for Sheikh Omar. My mom doesn't really believe in mental health. She always claims that I need to work on my deen, or I don't pray enough, or I don't remember Allah. That is why I have mental health issues. How can I speak to someone who keeps telling me I'm not doing enough in my religion?
So, I mean, I think based off of like what we've mentioned, that we still do have work to do in terms of educating, not just ourselves, but those who are around us, to kind of be able to break those misconceptions or maybe those cultural understandings that maybe don't recognize the role of mental health or it as something that can be in coordination or complementing our spiritual health. And so just being able to like have events like this, to be able to speak with those who are kind of have that background, like our mental health professionals, and then like those who have a spiritual background or spiritual knowledge as well, and just kind of just building a familiarity or building a knowledge base in ourselves and in those around us to kind of help break through that. So even if those who are around you, including your loved ones, they're not maybe at a place yet where they've accepted the reality of this being a real thing, that shouldn't stop us from getting that help or seeking that help, while at the same time trying to educate them in a empathetic and in a kind way, and not to look down on them either and feel like, oh, they don't know it, they're backwards, whatever it may be, because it's just when something is ingrained as a reality from maybe a person's entire lifetime, from a different background or a different upbringing, that can take a lot of time sometimes, and a lot of conversation and effort to kind of break through that and get to a point where those things are actually acknowledged as realities. So don't give up. Also, don't look down on a family member maybe who's not there yet either.
Right, thank you. I just have one more question for you, Sheikh Omar. How do we balance out getting help spiritually and getting help from outside factors like a therapist or a psychiatrist? Are there some things that can be cured only through prayer and dua?
So I think that having a strong spiritual foundation is definitely a key to mental health and mental well-being. And so that is something that we always encourage, and we always, mention and try to help utilize as a way to have that, that overall mental wellness. And I know a lot of professionals, they encourage this as well, some type of faith and some type of support system from that perspective. And so that becomes the foundation. But then, like was mentioned in the presentations and just from the answers from our experts, that when you start to recognize maybe that there are things that are just not sitting right, or you do feel that things are off with you, and it's something that maybe you can't quite put your finger on, or you don't feel you don't feel like there is anything being like that, an improvement or progress or solutions coming just from the spiritual side of it, then that may be a good indication to be able to to reach out to someone who has a mental health background, a mental health professional, and speak with someone who is also grounded in religious knowledge and stuff, for them to be able to facilitate for you to seek out mental health. I do that all the time. I know my role, I know my lane, and I try my best to stay in it. And sometimes people get a little bit frustrated with me because I'll refer a lot of people in a lot of different situations. This is something that you should get therapy for. This is something that you should reach out to a mental health professional, not to get it off of my plate or not to kind of just throw the responsibility elsewhere, but because I recognize that this is something that in coordination with a strong spiritual foundation that can be really improved and helped by seeking that professional help. So it's definitely a balance, definitely. And just being able to reach out and seek that help and access those different resources will definitely be something to improve on, our overall mental health and mental well-being.
Great, thank you, Sheikh Omar. So I have one more question that came in for Jill and Ryan. If our children show no interest in school and are struggling, what's the best way to deal with that, specifically if they're failing? And also, how can they receive services with you too?
Joe, I think your mic is off.
Thank you. Sorry. So unfortunately, that is a real situation that's happening for many youth. I am specifically, I work with Matia and Wabanzi Valley High School, and we are in all the District 204 high schools and middle schools, and this is a very common trend. I grew up in a household that is very education oriented. Like my mother was, if you don't get good grades and you don't go to college, your life's over. That's the kind of parent I had. And so I don't say this lightly because I do value education, but I think that school is important and we do want them to get help. I think our supporters are deans and counselors and getting them an IEP or an education plan that can help accommodate them. But also thinking of their grades are important, but their life is even more important. There's no way they'll make it to college if they're not going to be alive. And so how do we prioritize their health and making sure that, yes, your school is important, but I also want, how can I support you? What can I do? And so it's going to be getting them support, but also maybe that acceptance of their grades might not be the best for a little bit. And that's a hard thing for people to deal with. And that's a hard thing for students themselves to deal with. But I think that adds, if there's a lot of preoccupation on the grades, that will unfortunately increase the mental health concern. So I'm getting them help as well. But if there's this, if you're failing, then that's all you focus on. Unfortunately, that will not help.
Yeah.
And how to receive services with us. Ryan, I'm sorry, go ahead if you want to add on that.
You. Or maybe to expand on that point.
And how to receive services with us.
After you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. So how to receive services with us. We can give our information to all of the leaders here today, but we have an intake line. I can put the number in the chat for everyone to look at, and they'll also send it out. But just call our intake line and just request that if you want to see a specific therapist, our bios are online. Just request that, and intake will definitely talk with you. We accept insurance, we accept income-based pay, and then we have a grant program for other special situations. So we just try to provide the best services we can at the most affordable rate.
Yeah. And to briefly kind of expand upon Jill's point too, like we talked about during the presentation, an important part about that is coming from a place of empathy and understanding. It's like understanding why a person or why a student might not be motivated or discouraged to attend school in the first place too. And I always have to go ahead and put myself in my client's shoes as well. To shift from such a foundational way of education from being there in person to shifting to being online predominantly as well. It's a major change in the way that education typically happens for the most part for these students, and it requires a lot of adaptation that has a big impact on both our physical and mental health as well, from viewing a computer screen for hours upon hours on end too. So I always encourage empathy understanding and just, and just talking with, your child as well to understand what they might be going through too. And then in addition too, and something that, I've been at least working on with some of the clients I've been seeing for that are encountering similar issues is finding that spark of curiosity and that encouragement as to why it's helpful to continue moving forward while still being empathetic towards your emotions. What is going to help them get through the rest of the school year, and how is it meaningful and purposeful for them as well?
Thank you so much, Ryan, Jill, and Sheikh Omar for answering those questions. I know that there's a lot of more questions, but we're short on time, but thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to make one point, Zakia. So all the presentations and the presentation which Ryan did and Jill did, and also the recording of this video with the contact details of Ryan and Jill, we would pass it to the community, Ryan. So rest assured for that on that one. Yeah, go ahead, Zakia.
Thank you to Ryan and Jill and to Sheikh Omar and Brother Rahman for that. Again, we definitely appreciated having you. We love the presentation. And next up, we've got our own Brother Rahman Khan. He's an ICN board member and the chair of the School District Engagement Committee. So inshallah, I'm going to pass it over to Brother Rahman Khan.
Thank you, Aman. Thank you so much. So as I said, I think during the presentation of Ryan, we had some internet problem, connectivity problem. So we will make sure that, we send the presentation to you guys so that every one of the community can view the presentation as well. So with that, thank you for the community as part of ICN School District Engagement Committee and Youth Committee. I would like to thank the entire community for joining this event today. So these are very tough times. And, inshallah, may Allah make it easy for us and keep all of us safe. And I hope this type of programs, will certainly help us to pass through this tough times, inshallah. So I would like to thank the youth committee members and our youth directors, Aman and Zakia. Alhamdulillah, I think we are blessed with the next generation of great youths. So they did a great job doing this program. Alhamdulillah, thank you so much, Aman and Zakia, for that. And also, I would like to thank my own committee, School District Engagement Committee, like some of my sisters are here, alhamdulillah. So they do a fabulous job for us. Without their support, none of this program can be even achievable for us. Thank you, sisters and brothers on the School District Engagement Committee. And Brother Nasser, thank you so much. I know we approached you very late, but alhamdulillah, you are very humble enough to share your experience with us. Believe me, it was very, very heart-touching. And then it shows how important for us to ask for help when we suffer with the mental stress. Thank you so much for that, Brother Nasser. And Sheikh Umar, alhamdulillah, it's always good to hear from you, Sheikh. And you are always near and dear for us. And thanks for your insight on that. And last but not the least, Jill and Ryan, thumbs up to you guys. Thank you so much. It was wonderful, amazing presentation you guys did. And 360 Youth Service has been a great support for the communities like ICN. You guys have done, tremendous effort, and you guys have done many programs like this. And as a matter of fact, on the month of March, when we started the pandemic on 2020, 360 did a program for us, kind of a same program for us. And thank you so much for doing this again for us. I know we look forward for you guys anytime, and you guys support us a lot. Thank you so much for that, Jill and Ryan. Again, thank you everyone for joining this program. Inshallah, we will do some of these programs very regularly. May Allah keep us safe. Ameen. With that, I leave to Zakia and Aman.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Brother Rahman. I mean, to all of the du'as and to everybody for joining us and all. I mean, as a community, we started this event by saying that we were going to have a very important conversation. And I think on the other end of this event now, as we conclude, this is a step forward. And this conversation it's not done right here. This is something that is a continued conversation. It's something that allows all of us to, not only tap into our own situations and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as human beings, but also taking care of the people that we serve. At the end of the day, we are a community, and ICN as a community has a platform. So let's make sure that we're using that platform, not only to, provide programming, but also to provide aid to those who need it, whether it's ourselves or any of the people that attend our programs. So with that being said, inshallah, we're going to conclude with a little dua, a very short dua. And we know that Allah loves to forgive us, so we ask that Allah forgive us. And we know that Allah loves to protect us, so we ask that Allah protect us. And we know that Allah loves to guide us, so we ask that Allah guide us. We ask that Allah give us safety, security, both mentally and physically. We ask that Allah give us health and well-being. We ask that Allah allow us to remember Him not only today, but every day. And we ask that Allah allow us to gather not only with each other, but with each other in the best of places. We ask that Allah bless everybody that spoke today, and that He reward them for the change that they're bringing to our community and to all of our people. And with that, we say Ameen. And thank you once again to Jill and Ryan for joining us, to Sheikh Omar, to Brother Kashif, to Brother Rahman, to Nasser. Thank you to Zakia as well for doing such a great job hosting this. And with that, we thank everybody for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you soon. This is an ongoing effort. It doesn't end here. So this is a continued conversation. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. I just want to echo everything Aman said. It so perfectly. So thank you again, Jill and Ryan, and for everybody tuning in. And like Aman said, this conversation needs to keep going. And hopefully this brought more awareness to this issue within our community and everyone else. So thank you again.